The morning sun was shining bright over London as hundreds of people walked toward Buckingham Palace. It was a Tuesday in July, and the weather was perfect for sightseeing. Families with children, couples taking photos, and groups of friends all moved together like a slow river of excitement. Everyone wanted to see the famous royal guards and maybe catch a glimpse of the palace where the king lived. Marcus Johnson stepped off the red double-decker bus with his phone already in his hand. He was 28 years old and had traveled all the way from Australia for his first trip to London. His blonde hair was messy from the bus ride, and he wore a bright yellow t-shirt that said Adventure Seeker across the front. Marcus had been planning this trip for 2 years, saving money from his job at a surf shop back home in Sydney. The crowd grew thicker as Marcus walked closer to the palace gates. Children sat on their father's shoulders to see better. Elderly couples held hands and pointed at the beautiful building. Tour guides held up colorful flags and spoke in different languages to their groups. The sound of cameras clicking filled the air like raindrops on a roof. Marcus pulled out his phone and started recording a video for his social media. Everyone. Marcus here, and I'm finally at Buckingham Palace, he said into the camera with a big smile. This place is massive. Wait until you see these guards everyone talks about. He turned the camera around to show the crowd and the palace behind him. Near the tall black iron gates stood the royal guards. They wore bright red jackets with shiny gold buttons and tall black hats made of bear fur. These hats were so big they made the guards look like giants. Each guard held a rifle and stood perfectly still, like statues that someone had placed there hundreds of years ago. One of these guards was William Thompson. He was 32 years old and had been a royal guard for 5 years. Before this job, William had served in the army for 7 years. He had traveled to different countries and seen many things that most people only read about in books. Now he stood at his post every day, protecting the palace and keeping the old traditions alive. William's black boots were polished so well they looked like mirrors. His red jacket fit perfectly, and every button sparkled in the sunlight. Under his big hat, his brown eyes stayed focused straight ahead. He had learned to ignore the crowds, the noise, and the constant flash of cameras. This was his job, and he took it very seriously. The other tourists knew to keep their distance from the guards. Signs were posted everywhere in different languages, telling people where they could and could not go. Red ropes marked the boundaries, and security cameras watched everything. Most visitors were happy to take photos from a safe distance and respect the rules. Marcus noticed how still the guards were and thought it was funny. "Look at these guys," he said to another tourist standing nearby. "They're like robots or something. I bet they can't even hear us." The other tourist, an older woman from Germany, just smiled politely and moved away. She could tell that Marcus might cause trouble. As the morning went on, more and more people arrived. School groups came with their teachers, all wearing matching t-shirts. Japanese tourists took careful photos of every detail. A family from India tried to fit everyone into one picture with the palace in the background. Street performers played music nearby, and vendors sold souvenirs from small carts. Marcus wandered through the crowd, filming everything. He interviewed other tourists, asking them what they thought about the guards. Most people said they found them impressive and respectful. An elderly man from Scotland told Marcus that his grandfather had been a royal guard many years ago. A young girl from France said she wanted to be a guard when she grew up. But Marcus was getting bored with normal tourist activities. He wanted something more exciting for his videos. His social media followers back home expected him to do something crazy and fun. That was his style. At the Sydney Opera House, he had climbed over a barrier to get a better photo. At Uluru, he had ignored the signs and touched the sacred rock. His friends always laughed at his videos and called him brave. William Thompson could see Marcus moving through the crowd. Guards were trained to notice people who might cause problems. Marcus was louder than the other tourists and kept getting closer to the restricted areas. His bright yellow shirt made him easy to spot, and his big personality drew attention. The changing of the guard ceremony would begin soon. This was a special event that happened at certain times during the week. New guards would march in with perfect steps while military music played. The old guards would march away with the same perfect timing. Tourists loved this ceremony because it showed the tradition and discipline of the royal guards. William had participated in this ceremony hundreds of times. He knew exactly when to move, where to step, and how to hold his rifle. Every movement had been practiced until it became automatic. The ceremony was like a dance that told the story of British history and military pride. As 11 o'clock approached, the crowd grew even bigger. People pushed closer to get better views. Parents lifted their children higher. Everyone wanted to see the ceremony that had been happening for hundreds of years. The excitement in the air was like electricity before a thunderstorm. Marcus positioned himself near the front of the crowd, right next to the red rope that marked the boundary. He held his phone high above his head to record over the shorter people in front of him. "This is it, guys," he said into his camera. "The famous changing of the guard is about to start. This is going to be epic." The palace guards prepared for their ceremony. William adjusted his grip on his rifle and took a deep breath. He had done this many times before, but he still felt proud every time. This was more than just a job for him. It was a way to serve his country and honor all the guards who had come before him. In a few minutes, the ceremony would begin, and everything would change. The crowd would get more excited, the cameras would flash more often, and Marcus would make a decision that would affect everyone around him. But for now, everything was still calm, like the quiet moment before a storm begins. The morning sun continued to shine on the palace. The guards stood at their posts, and hundreds of tourists waited with excitement for what would happen next. The ceremony began with the sound of drums in the distance. The crowd became quiet as everyone turned to look down the long road leading to the palace. Marcus held his phone higher and started recording. "Here we go, everyone. The show is starting," he whispered into his camera with excitement. New guards marched toward the palace in perfect lines. Their red jackets moved together like one big red wave. Their black boots hit the ground at exactly the same time, making a sound like thunder. The crowd watched in amazement as these soldiers showed hundreds of years of British tradition. Marcus was not satisfied with his view. Even though he was close to the front, there were still people in front of him. A tall man blocked part of his camera shot. A woman with a big hat stood right where Marcus wanted to film. He started moving left and right, trying to find the perfect angle for his video. "Excuse me, mate," Marcus said to the people in front of him. "Can you move just a little? I'm trying to get this on video." Some people moved to help him, but others stayed where they were. They had been waiting just as long as Marcus to see the ceremony. As the new guards got closer, Marcus became more frustrated. His videos back home always got thousands of views because he did things that other tourists would not do. He thought about his followers who were waiting to see something exciting. Normal tourist videos were boring. He needed something special. Marcus looked at the red rope that separated the tourists from the guard area. It was not very thick, just a simple rope held up by metal posts. Signs hung from the rope in different languages, all saying the same thing: "Do not cross, restricted area." But Marcus had ignored signs like this before. He stepped closer to the rope and looked around. Security guards were watching the ceremony, not the crowd. Police officers were spread out but busy with traffic control. Most people were too busy taking photos to notice what one tourist was doing. William Thompson stood at his post, rifle in hand, watching the approaching guards. This was his favorite part of the job. The ceremony reminded him why he became a royal guard. It connected him to all the guards, who had stood in this same spot for hundreds of years. He felt proud to be part of something bigger than himself. Marcus made his decision. He lifted one leg and stepped over the red rope. The ground on the other side looked the same as the tourist area, but Marcus was now in a place where visitors were not allowed. He was only a few steps away from where William stood. The guard looked bigger up close, and his uniform looked even more impressive. At first, Marcus just stood there and took photos. He made sure to get himself in the pictures with the guard. Behind him, "Look where I am now," he said quietly into his phone camera. "I'm right next to one of the royal guards. This is incredible. Some tourists noticed what Marcus was doing. A few people pointed at him and whispered to each other. Mother pulled her children closer and moved away from the area. An elderly gentleman shook his head with disapproval. But no one said anything to Marcus directly. Marcus became braver. He moved even closer to William until he was standing right next to the guard. The ceremony was still happening nearby, so most people were watching that instead of Marcus. This, made him feel like he could do whatever he wanted. "Hey there, guard guy," Marcus said in a normal voice. William did not move or respond. His training taught him to ignore distractions and stay focused on his duty, but Marcus thought this was funny. "Oh, you're one of those silent types, huh?" Marcus laughed and moved his face closer to William's. "Can you even hear me in there? Under that big hat?" Marcus waved his hand in front of William's face, but the guard continued to stare straight ahead. This made Marcus even more excited. He started making faces at William, sticking out his tongue and making silly expressions. He held his phone up and recorded himself acting foolish right next to the serious guard. "My followers are going to love this," he thought to himself. The ceremony continued, but some tourists were now watching Marcus instead. They could not believe what they were seeing. Many of them had traveled from far away to see the royal guards and show respect for British traditions. Marcus's behavior was embarrassing and disrespectful. A Japanese tourist named Hiroshi was recording the ceremony when he noticed Marcus in his video. Hiroshi stopped recording and lowered his camera. He had deep respect for military traditions because his grandfather had been a soldier. What Marcus was doing felt very wrong to Hiroshi. Marcus did not notice the changing mood of the crowd. He was too busy enjoying himself and thinking about how many likes his video would get on social media. He put his arm around William's shoulder, like they were old friends posing for a photo. "Say cheese, buddy," Marcus said loudly. Several tourists gasped when they heard this. William remained perfectly still, but Marcus could see a small muscle in the guard's jaw tighten slightly. A security guard across the plaza noticed the commotion and started walking toward Marcus. But Marcus was too focused on his video to see the guard approaching. He continued to pose and make jokes, treating William like a statue in a museum instead of a real person doing an important job. Marcus then did something that shocked everyone. Nearby, he reached up and tried to put his tourist cap on top of William's rifle. The rifle was part of William's official equipment, and touching it was a serious violation of security protocols. "Let's see how you look with a real hat instead of that fuzzy thing." Marcus laughed as he balanced his cap on the rifle barrel. Some tourists started to back away, sensing that something bad was about to happen. William felt the weight of the cap on his rifle. Every part of his training told him to maintain his position, but this tourist had crossed a line that should never be crossed. The rifle was not a prop for tourist photos. It was a weapon that represented his authority and responsibility as a royal guard. The crowd was getting uncomfortable. Children asked their parents why the man in the yellow shirt was bothering the guard. Elderly visitors remembered stories their grandparents told about respecting the royal guards. Everyone could feel that Marcus had gone too far. Marcus was completely unaware of the tension he had created. He continued filming himself, making jokes, and treating the whole situation like it was a game. He thought he was being funny and entertaining. He did not understand that he was disrespecting not just William, but also the uniform William wore, the tradition he represented, and the country he served. The security guard was getting closer, but he was still several yards away and had to move carefully through the thick crowd. Marcus had maybe 30 more seconds before someone in authority would reach him and end his show. In those 30 seconds, Marcus decided to do one more thing for his video. He reached out his hand toward William's uniform, planning to touch the bright red fabric and gold buttons. This would be the final scene in his tourist adventure video, but as his hand moved closer to William's chest, something unexpected was about to happen. The guard who had stood silently through minutes of disrespect was about to respond in a way that no one in the crowd could have predicted. Marcus's hand was only inches away from William's uniform when something extraordinary happened. The guard who had been silent and still as a statue suddenly spoke. Sir, William's voice cut through the noise of the crowd like a sharp knife through paper. The word was spoken clearly and with such authority that everyone within 50 feet stopped what they were doing and turned to look. Marcus froze with his hand still reaching toward the guard. His mouth fell open in surprise. He had been treating William like a lifeless statue for the past 10 minutes, never expecting the guard to actually speak to him. Sir, William repeated, his voice strong and steady, you are currently standing in a restricted area. The guard's eyes remained fixed straight ahead, but his words were directed clearly at Marcus. Every word was pronounced perfectly, like a teacher speaking to a classroom. The crowd around them became completely silent. Phones that had been recording the ceremony were now pointed at William and Marcus. Parents picked up their children to see better. Elderly tourists leaned forward, with their hands cupped to their ears. Everyone wanted to hear what the royal guard would say next. Marcus looked around nervously. He suddenly realized that hundreds of people were staring at him. The fun game he thought he was playing had become something much more serious. His yellow shirt, which had helped him stand out in the crowd, now made him feel like he was under a spotlight. I was just taking some photos, Marcus stammered. His confident smile from earlier was gone. He tried to laugh, but it sounded forced and uncomfortable. No harm done, right, mate? William continued to look straight ahead, but his voice remained strong and clear. This area is protected by Her Majesty's Guard for the safety and security of the royal residents and all visitors. Each word was carefully chosen and delivered with military precision. The security guard, who had been walking toward Marcus, stopped where he was. Even he wanted to hear what William would say. In all his years working at the palace, he had never seen a royal guard speak directly to a tourist during the ceremony. The rope and signs you crossed are not suggestions, sir, William continued. They are legal boundaries established by royal protocol and British law. His tone was not angry or mean, but it was firm and serious. Your actions show disrespect not only to these protocols but to the crown itself. Marcus felt his face turning red. He looked around at all the people watching him and realized how foolish he must look. A child in the crowd pointed at him and asked his mother in a loud whisper, "Why is that man in trouble, Mummy?" William was not finished speaking. Furthermore, sir, your behavior demonstrates a lack of understanding about the role and responsibility of the royal guard. His voice carried across the plaza like a speech being given at an important ceremony. An elderly woman from Scotland stepped closer to hear better. She remembered her late husband, who had served in the British Army during World War II. She knew the importance of military discipline and respect. Tears formed in her eyes as she listened to William's dignified response to such disrespectful treatment. We are not tourist attractions or entertainment for your social media, William said, his words becoming more powerful with each sentence. We are active duty military personnel with the sworn duty to protect this palace, its residents, and all who visit these grounds, Marcus tried to interrupt. Look, I didn't mean any... I am not finished, sir, William said firmly but politely. Marcus immediately became quiet. There was something in the guard's voice that commanded respect and attention. The ceremony in the background had completed, but none of the tourists were leaving. Word was spreading quickly through the crowd that something important was happening. People who had been walking away turned around and came back. Tour guides forgot about their schedules and watched with their groups. Each member of the Royal Guard has sworn an oath, William continued. We promise to serve with honor, dignity, and respect for the traditions that have protected this nation for centuries. His voice grew stronger as he spoke about his duty. A teenager in the crowd was recording everything on his phone. He had never heard a royal guard speak before, and he knew this was something special. His hands were shaking slightly as he tried to keep the camera steady. William's words reached beyond just Marcus. Everyone in the crowd felt like they were learning something important. The uniform I wear represents every man and woman who has served before me and will serve after me. When you disrespect this uniform, you disrespect all of them. Marcus felt smaller and smaller as William spoke. The guard's words were not mean or harsh, but they were powerful and true. Marcus began to understand that his actions were not just about breaking rules. He had been disrespectful to something much bigger and more important than he realized. "The rifle you used as a prop for your entertainment," William said, referring to Marcus's tourist cap that was still balanced on the weapon, "is a symbol of the responsibility I carry to protect and serve. It is not a toy for your amusement." A French tourist in the crowd whispered to her husband, "This is more educational than any tour guide we have had." Her husband nodded in agreement. They were learning more about British culture and values in these few minutes than they had learned all week. William paused for a moment, and the silence felt heavy with meaning. Everyone waited to hear what he would say next. Marcus stood frozen, not sure if he should move or speak or just disappear into the ground. "I stand here today," William continued, "not because I have to, but because I choose to. I choose to honor the men and women who served before me. I choose to protect the traditions that make our nation strong. I choose to treat this duty with the respect it deserves." The crowd was completely captivated. Many people had tears in their eyes. Parents were thinking about what they could learn from this guard's words. Children were seeing an example of dignity and strength that they would remember for the rest of their lives. Marcus finally understood the weight of what he had done. This was not just about him having fun or getting likes on social media. He had been disrespectful to something sacred and important. The guard's calm but powerful response was teaching him and everyone else a lesson about respect, duty, and honor. The security guard who had been approaching decided to stay back and let William finish what he was saying. Even the police officers nearby had stopped their other duties to listen. This was a moment that none of them had ever experienced before. William was about to say something that would change not just Marcus, but everyone who heard it. The crowd waited in complete silence for the Royal Guard's final words. William took a deep breath before speaking again. The crowd remained completely silent, as if everyone was holding their breath at the same time. Even the sounds of London traffic seemed to fade away, leaving only the guard's voice and the attention of hundreds of people. "Let me tell you about what this uniform really means," William said, his voice now taking on the tone of a teacher sharing important knowledge. "Every thread in this red jacket tells a story of sacrifice and service that goes back hundreds of years." Marcus found himself actually listening instead of thinking about his phone or his video. Something in William's voice made him want to understand what the guard was trying to teach him. "The red color of our jackets," William continued, "has been worn by British soldiers since the 1600s. It was chosen because it was the color of strength and courage. When enemy soldiers saw the red coats coming, they knew they were facing men who would never give up or run away." An American family in the crowd moved closer. The father was a veteran who had served in Iraq, and he recognized the pride and honor in William's voice. He put his hand on his young son's shoulder and whispered, "Listen carefully, buddy. This is important." William's eyes remained focused straight ahead, but his words painted pictures that everyone could see in their minds. "The tall hat you see? On my head is made from the fur of bears that lived in Canada over 100 years ago. Each hat takes the fur from one whole bear and costs more money than most people make in a month." A school group from London had arrived just as William began speaking. Their teacher quickly gathered them around to listen. She knew this was better than any lesson she could teach in a classroom. The children stood quietly, their eyes wide, with wonder as they learned things they had never heard before. "But the hat is not just for show," William explained. "It makes us look taller and more impressive, yes, but it also reminds us of the weight of responsibility we carry. Every day, when I put on this hat, I remember that I am representing something bigger than myself." Marcus felt his phone grow heavy in his hand. He had been recording everything, but now he wondered if he should stop. This felt too important and too personal to be just another video for social media. William continued his lesson, speaking to Marcus but teaching everyone who could hear him. "The boots I wear are polished every single day until they shine like mirrors. This takes time and effort, but it teaches us discipline and attention to detail. If we cannot take care of our own appearance, how can people trust us to take care of their safety?" A grandmother from Wales thought about her grandson who was thinking about joining the military. She made a mental note to tell him about this. Guard's words. She could see the pride and dedication in everything William was saying. The rifle I carry, William said, his voice becoming more serious, is not just a weapon. It is a symbol of the trust that the people of Britain have placed in me. They trust me to protect what is precious to them. They trust me to use good judgment and to never abuse the power I have been given. The teenager who had been recording everything lowered his phone. He realized that watching this through a screen was not the same as really experiencing it. He wanted to remember every word, not just have a video of it. William's voice grew softer but somehow more powerful at the same time. Most people do not know that we stand here for hours at a time, no matter what the weather is like. We stand in the rain until our uniforms are soaked. We stand in the snow until our feet are numb. We stand in the heat until sweat runs down our faces. Marcus was beginning to understand just how wrong he had been. These guards were not statues or robots. They were real people doing a difficult job that required strength, dedication, and sacrifice. We do this, William continued, because we believe in something. We believe that some things are worth protecting. We believe that tradition and honor matter. We believe that our service makes a difference, even if most people never think about it. A couple from Germany held hands as they listened. They had visited many countries and seen many different cultures, but they had never experienced anything like this. The guards' words were teaching them about British values and the importance of service to others. William paused for a moment, and in that silence everyone could hear the sound of their own heartbeats. The guards' lesson was reaching into their hearts and minds, making them think about respect, duty, and what it means to serve something bigger than yourself. We miss birthdays with our families, William said, his voice carrying a hint of sadness. We miss Christmas dinners and birthday parties and school plays for our children. We do this because our duty comes first and we accept that sacrifice as part of our service. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. He thought about his own family back in Australia and how he had never really thought about the sacrifices that other people made for their jobs and their countries. When tourists like you come here, William said, looking directly ahead but clearly speaking to Marcus, most of them understand that what we do is important. They take their photos respectfully. They teach their children to admire what we represent. They leave here with a better understanding of British history and values. The crowd was completely absorbed in William's words. People who had planned to spend only a few minutes at the palace were now standing still, learning lessons they would remember for the rest of their lives. But sometimes, William continued, someone comes along who sees only a person in a funny costume. They think we are here for their entertainment. They do not understand that behind this uniform is a real person with feelings, with a family, with dreams and fears just like everyone else. Marcus realized that William was talking about him, but the guard's words were not meant to hurt or embarrass him. They were meant to help him understand and learn from his mistakes. Every royal guard has a story, William said, his voice now filled with warmth and pride. We come from different backgrounds and different parts of the country. Some of us grew up poor, others grew up wealthy. Some of us always wanted to be soldiers, others discovered this calling later in life. A young girl in the crowd raised her hand as if she was in school. "What's your story?" she asked in a small voice. Her mother tried to quiet her, but William heard the question and decided to answer it. William's eyes softened when he heard the little girl's question about his story. For the first time since he began speaking, he allowed himself a small smile. "My story?" he repeated gently. "I grew up in a small town where my father worked in a factory and my mother was a nurse. I was not the best student in school, and I did not know what I wanted to do with my life." The crowd leaned in closer, eager to hear more. Marcus found himself genuinely interested in learning about the person behind the uniform. His phone was still recording, but he had forgotten all about getting content for social media. "When I was 18, William continued, I felt lost and confused about my future. My mother suggested I talk to a military recruiter. At first, I thought the military was just for people who liked fighting or could not do anything else. But the recruiter taught me something important. A teenage boy in the crowd was listening carefully. He was about to graduate from school and felt just as lost as William had described feeling. Every word the guard spoke seemed to be meant for him personally. The recruiter told me that military service was not about fighting, William explained. It was about serving others, learning discipline, and becoming the best version of yourself. He said the military would teach me skills I could use anywhere and give me confidence I never knew I had. Marcus thought about his own life back in Australia. He worked at a surf shop and spent most of his time trying to get attention on social media. He had never really thought about serving others or becoming a better person. So I joined the army, William said, his voice growing stronger with pride. The training was the hardest thing I had ever done. There were days when I wanted to quit and go home. But my fellow soldiers helped me, and I learned that I was stronger than I thought I was. An elderly veteran in the crowd nodded his head in understanding. He remembered his own military training and the friendships he had made with his fellow soldiers. Those friendships had lasted his entire life. After 7 years in the army, I had the chance to try out for the Royal Guard, William continued. Only a few soldiers are chosen for this honor. The training was even harder than regular army training. We had to learn history, protocol, and ceremonial procedures that go back centuries. A tourist from Japan was amazed by what she was hearing. In her country, they also had ceremonies and traditions that were hundreds of years old. She understood how much work and dedication it took to keep these traditions alive. But the hardest part, William said, his voice becoming more personal, was learning to stand perfectly still for hours while people took photos and sometimes made fun of us. We had to learn to ignore comments and distractions and stay focused on our duty. Marcus felt a sharp pain in his stomach as he realized he had been one of those people making fun and causing distractions. He looked down at his feet, feeling ashamed of his behavior. The first time I put on this uniform, William said, I felt connected to every guard who had worn it before me. I thought about the guards who had stood here during World War II while bombs fell on London. I thought about the guards who had protected the royal family through good times and bad times. The crowd was completely silent except for the occasional sniffle from someone who was moved to tears by William's story. Even the children were standing perfectly still, understanding that they were hearing something very special. William's voice grew softer as he continued. Every day when I come to work, I think about the trust that has been placed in me. The people of Britain trust me to protect their history, their traditions, and their royal family. That trust is the most important thing I carry. Marcus could not hold back his emotions any longer. Tears began rolling down his cheeks as he realized how badly he had misunderstood everything. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. I'm really, really sorry. The crowd turned to look at Marcus as he continued speaking. I thought you were just I don't know, like a statue or something for tourists to look at. I didn't understand that you were a real person with a real job and real feelings. William finally turned his head slightly to look at Marcus directly. His eyes were kind but serious. Apology accepted, sir, he said simply, but Marcus was not finished. He stepped back from William and turned to face the crowd. Everyone, please. Listen to me, he said loudly. I came here today thinking I was just having fun, but I was wrong. I was disrespectful and ignorant. The crowd listened as Marcus continued his apology. This gentleman has taught me more in the last few minutes than I learned in all my years of school. He's taught me about respect, duty, and sacrifice. He's taught me that some things are bigger and more important than getting likes on social media. A woman in the crowd started clapping slowly. Soon, other people joined in, and within seconds, the entire crowd was applauding. They were not just clapping for Marcus's apology, but for William's dignity and the lesson they had all learned. Marcus walked over to William's rifle and carefully removed his tourist cap. He folded the cap respectfully and stepped back to where he belonged, behind the red rope with the other tourists. Thank you, Marcus said to William. Thank you for teaching me something I needed to learn. I promise I will never forget this. William gave Marcus a small nod and returned to his position of attention, looking straight ahead once again. But everyone could see that something had changed. The atmosphere was different now. There was more respect, more understanding, and more appreciation for what the Royal Guards represented. People in the crowd began talking quietly to each other about what they had just witnessed. Parents explained to their children what they had learned. Tour guides made notes about things they wanted to remember for future groups. The teenager who had been recording put his phone away and walked up to Marcus. "That was incredible, mate," he said. "Are you going to post that video?" Marcus thought for a moment. "Yes," he said. "But not the way I originally planned. I'm going to share what I learned here today. I'm going to help other people understand what I understand now." Over the next few hours, word spread about what had happened at Buckingham Palace. People who had been there told their friends and family. Tour guides shared the story with their groups. Hotel staff heard about it from returning guests. By evening, videos of William's speech and Marcus's apology were being shared all over social media. But instead of being laughed at or mocked, the videos were being shared with respect and admiration. People were commenting about how moved they were by the guards' dignity. And the tourist transformation. Marcus spent the rest of his time in London visiting the palace every day. He would stand respectfully behind the rope and watch the guards, with new understanding and appreciation. He never tried to get their attention or take selfies with them. Instead, he simply observed and learned. On his last day in London, Marcus wrote a long post on his social media accounts. He told the story of what had happened and what he had learned. He encouraged his followers to travel with respect and to remember that the people they meet in other countries are real people with real stories, not just background characters for their vacation photos. The post received more likes, shares, and positive comments than anything Marcus had ever posted before. But more importantly, it inspired other travelers to think more carefully about how they behaved when visiting new places. William continued his duties as a royal guard, standing proudly at his post each day. He never spoke about what had happened with Marcus, but other guards heard the story and felt proud of their colleagues' handling of a difficult situation. The little girl who had asked William about his story convinced her parents to bring her back to the palace several more times during their vacation. Each time she would wave respectfully at the guards and tell other children about the importance of their job. And somewhere in Australia, Marcus's friends and family watched his videos and read his posts with new respect for the young man who had learned an important lesson about life, respect, and the power of dignity in the face of disrespect.